Tonight, the roadmap to recovery. Australia's future revealed. National Cabinet agrees on a three-stage process to open up the country, but we are being warned it will come at a cost. So what will happen and when? The timeline for lifting the lockdown in New South Wales and why it'll take a little longer for our state to relax. Confusion and panic. The Ruby Princess inquiry hears the frantic phone calls from on board over concerns of corona-infected passengers. Multi-million-dollar fraud at one of Sydney's most prestigious schools. The financial officer accused of using his job to fill his own bank account. Payback for Andrew Constance, dumped as Leader of the House after his election and by-election backflip. The Premier to now reshuffle her fractured cabinet. And the NRL dealt a blow over its flu jab policy. The Queensland government stepping in to stamp players out.
This is 10 News First Sydney with Sandra Sully.
Good evening. Restaurants and cafes are about to reopen. Pubs will remain shut for months and flying overseas may not happen until next year. But at least for the first time, there is now a definitive plan to get the country out of this COVID-19 nightmare. It is a three-step model with risks. But the Prime Minister says it's time to be brave and stop hiding under the doona. It is now up to each state to pull the trigger.
It's been a bumpy ride, but Australia now has a roadmap for reopening.
We cannot allow our fear of going backwards from stopping us from going forwards.
We're being warned there will be outbreaks and setbacks, but it's time to crawl out from under the covers.
You can stay under the doona forever and you'll never face any danger. But we've got to get out from under the doona.
The important thing is not the size of the outbreak, the important thing is the response.
Step 1 allows for gatherings up to 10 people outside and up to 5 at home. We'll also be allowed to go to restaurants and cafes, shopping centres, playgrounds and travel locally again.
That will mean many cafes and restaurants won't be able to open, but many that are doing takeaway may well want to put up enough distant tables to start just gently serving 10 people at a time. We want to keep it gentle and careful. Step 1 is tentative baby steps.
Step 2 will allow for gatherings of up to 20 people outside and we'll be able to go back to gyms, beauty salons and cinemas. Some interstate travel will also be permitted and we'll see a return of community sport.
In this plan, we walk before we run. Not everything will go to plan. There will be inconsistencies. States will and must move at their own pace.
We should reach stage 3 by July, when gatherings of up to 100 will be allowed. Pubs and clubs can throw open their doors, all interstate travel will return, and most workplaces will fully reopen.
Opening up most of the economy, but again in a COVID-safe way, with strict distancing, strict hygiene.
We've got to get Australians to get their confidence back, and they have every reason to get their confidence back.
The National Cabinet settled on the measures, but the timing of the rollout will be different depending on where you live.
The pace, though, will totally be up to the states and territories.
By July, the government is hoping 850,000 jobs will have been restored. And as the Prime Minister revealed today, that means there's no guarantee the government's income support measures, like the JobKeeper and the Job Seeker schemes, will last the full 6 months, as initially touted.
I give them the certainty that I want them to be back in their jobs where they don't need it. That's what we want.
Just as long as they're feeling well.
No more heroics of coming to work with a cough and a cold and a sore throat. That's off the agenda for every Australian for the foreseeable future. Please.
So we won't need to do a U-turn. Tegan George for 10 News First.
The question now is, when will New South Wales put that plan into action? Well, schools will reopen on Monday, but the timetable from then on remains unclear, with the Premier flagging no new rules before Mother's Day on Sunday, at the very least. But what comes next will be determined by our infection rate. 4 new cases have been recorded in New South Wales, with more than 9,000 tests carried out over 24 hours. Now, that brings the state's total to 3,047. Almost 2,500 people have recovered.
Remaining under wraps, New South Wales is still not ready to play, our Premier refusing to further relax restrictions this weekend.
You can't just make a decision and then implement it automatically. There's 8 million people I need to consider.
States will and must move at their own pace and will cut and paste out of this plan to suit their local circumstances.
Queensland and South Australia have already declared they'll start opening up next weekend. Victoria is being more cautious, like us.
But the plan in New South Wales, as far as possible, is to keep moving forward without ever having to go backwards.
That's because we face different challenges. Another plane load of Aussies flew into Sydney today, one of 3 Qantas flights this week, collecting those stranded in India.
I am very lucky and feel charming to on Aussie land again, like a kangaroo jumping.
Straight into quarantine after 2 months stuck in Delhi.
It's going to be hard, but, you know, could be a lot worse. And it's a 5-star hotel, not a military barracks, so I think we're pretty happy.
We know that Sydney is the main international hub for returning to Australia, so it's logical that the continuation of larger quarantine numbers will continue to happen here.
Since March 29, Aussies flying back from overseas have been largely quarantined in New South Wales, more than 13,000 people. Only 65% live here. The other 35% then travel to their homes interstate, but not before they were cared for by 31 hotels across Sydney.
I want to say an incredibly big thank you to all of the hotel staff that have been involved in this program. We've, for all intents and purposes, turned you into our front line.
So for now, 2 adults and their children can visit another person's home. Gatherings in a public place are limited to 2 people. Some retailers are opening their doors and open houses and auctions will begin again tomorrow, but strict social distancing rules apply. No matter where you are in Australia, some of the last places to reopen are pubs, clubs and gaming venues like the casino. They're going to remain closed until July at the earliest.
That's horrible. That's truly horrible.
But our cafe owners are putting the shine on things.
Oh, I just can't wait. It feels like a lifetime.
They've got a seat at the table already. Ali Donaldson for 10 News First.
The Special Commission of Inquiry into the Ruby Princess disaster has heard evidence of a flurry of late-night phone calls over concerns that coronavirus was on board the ship just hours before it docked in Sydney. The New South Wales Port Authority had even refused to bring the ship into port, but reversed that decision after being incorrectly told 2 sick patients were not infected with the virus.
Sitting off the coast of Manila, the Ruby Princess is now waiting with other cruise ships for permission to offload its Filipino crew, as the inquiry into its handling here turns to the New South Wales Port Authority and why they reversed an 11th-hour decision to stop it docking here.
It had been said that the ambulances are not attending for COVID, that Health had not said that there was COVID on board.
The inquiry has been told as the ship sailed towards Sydney, there were a number of phone calls over concerns of COVID-19 on board. It started at 6:59 on the 18th after Carnival Australia rang New South Wales Ambulance to remove 2 passengers, saying they've been tested for coronavirus, so precautions need to be taken. Over the next few hours, there was a flurry of phone calls between the Port Authority, the Ambos and Water Police. Just after midnight, Water Police again called New South Wales Ambulance, telling them the Harbour Master. They've called the CEO of Carnival Australia. He said they booked 2 ambulances for non-COVID. By 12:35 a.m, the Harbour Master brings them back, saying, "It's all happening now. We're trying to raise this ship. We are trying to speak to their doctor. Can you guys just treat it as corona?" That was Harbour Master Cameron Butchard. His boss today told the Commission they couldn't contact New South Wales Health at the time.
Did it concern you that there wasn't someone from New South Wales Health to contact?
Yes.
A critical moment that could have changed it all. Ursula Hager for 10 News First.
A former financier is tonight accused of swindling more than $7 million from one of Sydney's most prestigious schools. Police say he almost got away with it until a deep dive into bank records allegedly revealed 15 years of illegal transactions.
At the sprawling and elite Maria College in our eastern suburbs, a year's tuition will set you back up to $35,000. Multiply that by 210 students, and that's nearly how much one of its former bean counters allegedly fleeced it.
$7.4 million, it's certainly not money I have lying around, and the average person wouldn't.
Augustin Gus Nosti is accused of redirecting the funds from the school straight into his personal bank account. Police say there were more than 400 transactions ranging from $2,000 to around $240,000.
Forensic accountants were employed by the school and they identified the discrepancies.
It's alleged the deceit began when Mr Nosti joined the school in 2004, with millions vanishing up until last year. That's when he finished up and police claim the fraudulent transactions stopped. An investigation lasting 6 months has now resulted in the 57-year-old being charged. A letter to parents also reveals that Mr Nosti's assets have been frozen as the school tries desperately to get its money back. Mr Nosti has been bailed to appear in court in July, his first chance to defend the charges against him. Fraud experts say workplaces like these can be soft targets for white-collar crime.
In a private school where we see tuition fees coming from lots of sources, I think the opportunity of fraud is probably elevated.
Michael Hammond for 10 News First.
The man responsible for a deadly hospital bungle which permanently altered the life of one baby and killed another has been convicted and ordered to pay $100,000. During sentencing, the judge said had Christopher Turner carried out some simple tests, those tragedies would not have happened.
Christopher Turner is guilty of a deadly mix-up.
In 43 years as a barrister and then a judge, I cannot think of a more tragic case.
He installed gas outlets at Bankstown Hospital back to front, which saw 2 newborns given nitrogen instead of oxygen.
Had he properly carried out tests of no great complexity, these 2 tragedies could not have happened.
The mistake 4 years ago means Amelia Khan lives with permanent brain damage, requiring 24-hour care and a feeding tube. And it killed John Gannam 57 minutes after he was born.
I've had a general anaesthetic, and then I woke up and I told them I want to see my baby. They said your baby didn't make it.
Turner pleaded guilty to failing to comply with a health and safety duty in February, something Judge David Russell acknowledged could have catastrophically impacted more than just 2 families.
Every baby born in Operating Theatre 8 was put at risk.
The company Turner subcontracted to Bock Limited was cleared of any breaches on Tuesday, found to not be responsible for the failings of one of its workers. He was convicted and ordered to pay $100,000, plus the prosecutor's costs, estimated at $150,000. But this process has shown the Khan family that errors were made by others too, and they are calling for Safe Work New South Wales to reopen its investigation, saying in a statement, "This never should have happened, and we must make sure that nothing like this ever happens again." Kimberly Pratt for 10 News First.
We have some breaking news now, and a federal court judge has just revealed how one of our most decorated soldiers, Ben Robert Smith, and his family are apparently being tormented and suffering as he sues Channel 9's newspapers for defamation, claiming they made him out to be a war criminal. Today, the VC winner's trial was delayed until after the COVID-19 crisis has passed, because some of the evidence will be so sensitive it cannot be streamed via video conferencing. Today's judgment also included claims that Robert Smith has developed acute insomnia and anxiety, and other children have taunted his daughter by saying that he's a murderer. A new date for the defamation hearing has not yet been set. After a week of watching two of her senior ministers squabble over a potential switch to federal politics, the Premier has taken action. Gladys Berejiklian has stripped Transport Minister Andrew Constance of a key parliamentary role, and she's warned other colleagues to keep their heads down or there will be more significant changes.
It's been an embarrassing week of infighting for the coalition.
Self-indulgent on any level isn't acceptable by the Australian public, nor should it be. We deserve an uppercut.
It's definitely not an uppercut, but the Premier has punished Bega MP Andrew Constance. The senior Liberal has lost his job as Leader of the House.
Leader of the House.
It doesn't come with extra pay, but is a leadership position that sets the agenda in Parliament. The Premier has been under pressure to cut her Transport Minister loose after he announced his nomination for the vacant federal seat of Eden-Monaro on Tuesday, then withdrew it on Wednesday. Publicly, the Premier makes the decision sound mutual.
Well, he indicated already that he wants to spend his time in his community. He has a very big portfolio in transport, so it stands to reason that he no longer have that responsibility as Leader of the House.
But 10 News First understands it was her call to dump him. That's despite Andrew Constance getting on with the job. As late as 2:30 yesterday afternoon, he was meeting with his opposite number in Labor, discussing the plan for Parliament to briefly return next Tuesday.
We're still yet to see the legislation, we're still yet to see any agenda, and now the person who was running the show is no longer in charge.
The tussle between John Barilaro and Andrew Constance over Eden-Monaro has distracted from the Premier's message that her team is focused on COVID-19. A reshuffling of her cabinet is now on the cards, meaning more jobs could go.
I expect every member of my team to keep their head down and work hard.
Attorney General Mark Speakman is now Leader of the House. Lachlan Kennedy for 10 News First.
Well, there are yet more question marks over any return to action for the NRL. Matt Burke joins me now with the latest, Matt.
Yeah, good evening, Sandra. Project Apollo appeared set for liftoff, but now could be grounded by the league's health policy. After the NRL softened their stance on players receiving the flu shot, the Queensland government today intervened, standing down 3 Titans over their refusal to get the jab.
Rugby League has tackled a lot of challenges head-on since COVID-19. A simple flu jab, now the most complicated.
So I've had a discussion with them this morning and they've stood down those 3 players at the moment until we work through what it means.
Among those benched, Titan star Bryce Cartwright, the unofficial spokesman for anti-vax players. He prefers the title pro-choice and said he wouldn't be bullied into risking the health of his family.
I have spoken to him today and just to make sure we are compliant as a club, and he informed me that, yeah, he signed the waiver.
Teammate Nathan Peets quick to reassure fans he will put the game first, tweeting he only refused the shot due to a bad experience in the past and was off to the doctor this afternoon. The no jab, no play concept was the brainchild of Prime Minister Scott Morrison back when he was Social Services Minister.
Now, ultimately, the states and territories have to determine what their health requirements are as they apply to the NRL, and if they were to be insisting on that, then I would think that was entirely reasonable.
Former ASADA boss Richard Ings believes in this corona world, sporting codes should have the power to sideline any player who risks the health of others.
They're not considered part of an anti-doping regime. They're perfectly allowed. They're perfectly permitted. And in this particular situation, in protecting health and safety of fellow competitors, it should be actively encouraged. Indeed, it should be a mandatory requirement.
The master negotiators at the NRL sold rugby league's return to state governments and health authorities with the promise of the world's strictest biosecurity measures. On Monday, all players received a 48-page rule book to study, but the league has since rewritten the clause on compulsory vaccines.
We're not going to tolerate anybody. No individual, no organisation is above the health advice.
Ros Kelly for 10 News First.
And Sandra, this story is developing. We'll have more later in sport.
All right, thank you, Matt. Stay with us after the break. Britain stops to mark 75 years since victory in Europe as the Queen prepares to echo her father. The truck driver who was at the wheel of this fiery crash and now wants to spend less time in jail. Coronavirus strikes deep inside the White House as more bad news about America's future emerges. From nostril to result and every step in between, we go inside a virus testing lab. And even the royals have to homeschool. Kate gives us a glimpse of what it's really like with 3 kids at home.
Definitely.
Wow. Yes. I'll have a slice of that.
Get in my mouth, please.
Have you been missing Mel, Lloyd and Celia? Well, they're back with Ed and Sam on the new season of Have You Been Paying Attention? Monday.
A truck driver who was given a 12-and-a-half-year jail sentence last year for stealing a truck and then causing a devastating rampage through Singleton was today back in court and appealing the severity of his penalty. Rodney Johnson, through his lawyer, argued that he was having a psychotic episode at the time and that graphic video of the incident swayed the judge's decision.
The images are terrifying. A fiery mess tearing apart the main street of Singleton.
Oh, God! It's going to blow.
Rodney Johnson was the driver, a schizophrenic who was off his medication. He'd stolen the truck hours earlier and led police on a wild 100-kilometre chase while he was having a psychotic episode. He can be seen escaping the burning wreck, but ultimately he could not escape justice. Last year, a court handed him a maximum 12-and-a-half-year jail sentence with a non-parole period of 6.5. But today he told 3 Supreme Court appeal judges the sentence was too harsh. His lawyer arguing his mental illness was not fully taken into account and that the images shown in court were highly emotive. Having seen the footage, it was easy for the court at first instance to be distracted by the potential of things like death and so on, his lawyer said, but should be kept in context. But Justice Hume asked, when you talk about someone driving a 42-tonne motor vehicle in the manner he did, why is it a distraction to reflect on the harm that was caused? The Crown prosecutor also added his mental illness was clearly a significant factor, but the Crown and the judge took that into account at the time. What His Honour did was a classic balancing act of all factors. The judges were reminded of the horror that victims went through. Tony Deacon and his wife sat in their car and they were caught up in the carnage. When he got out, he said the whole thing reminded him of a war zone and it's a scene that he will never forget. The appeal judges will now consider their decision while the victims continue to deal with their trauma. Steve Hart for 10 News First.
Police have released CCTV footage related to an alleged online ticket scam targeting sport, music and food festivals. Officers want to talk to this man, believed to be in his 30s, with 2 heavily tattooed arms and a female in her 20s. Both are believed to be in Victoria. Now, those scammed were told to transfer money into a bank account but never received a ticket in return.
We are aware that there's probably a number of people out there that haven't reported to police, so please come forward and report those fraudulent transactions.
Police believe more people may be involved and urge anyone with information to come forward. Getting home on a Friday night can be tricky, as you know. Let's find out if that's the case tonight. Marina Ivanovic, not so lucky for those at Maroubra, where there's been a nasty accident.
Yeah, Sandra, it's involving a car and a motorcycle closing Bunurong Road completely southbound at the moment at Fitzgerald Avenue. Northbound traffic also affected. And just having a look through Moorebank for the M5 outbound run, it's still quite slow from an earlier incident. I'm Marina Ivanovic in the ABC Reading Eggs Traffic Chopper.
Well, at this stage of the week, as you know, all eyes are already on the weekend. Tim Bally, you have been promising a summary blast.
Well, what about that for a fabulous Friday? Promising? What about delivering, souls? That's what I'm about. The others promise, I deliver. Let's have a look at that day out there today. Fridays are always a bit special, but when they hit 29 degrees in May, I will take a bow on that one. Currently 24 degrees and glorious. Let's have a look at New South Wales. Boy, it was a good-looking drop a day. Broken Hill 23, Dubbo 24 degrees, Orange 17, Burke 29, shared the honours with Sydney. Glen Innes -1 degree the low, Lismore 27, Coffs Harbour 27 degrees, Nowra 27. It was a shiny, happy-looking Friday everywhere you look. Wagga Wagga 22 degrees, Canberra 20, and the super suburbs of Sydney were sensational today. Bankstown 27, Parramatta 27 degrees, Richmond likewise, galloping Gosford 26, terrific Terry Hills 25 degrees, and there's more of it on the way tomorrow. This job is just too easy, Souls.
Thank you, Tim. Up next here on 10 News First, we will take you to a very different UK as Britons get ready to celebrate VE Day. Which country is staring down the barrel of its worst recession in 300 years? And the baby bear who just can't wait for summer. As for today's petrol prices around the suburbs of Sydney, well, the cheapest we found today was 83 cents. That was at Villawood. The average price across the city, $1.10. But fill up fast, everyone. Prices are set to rise come Monday.
As a parent, you ask, what's the best way to support my child? From first words to gaining confidence for new adventures, you're right there by their side. Wherever they are on their learning journey, ABC Reading Eggs is there to help you. Start your ABC Reading Eggs journey today.
We can help you find the benefits you may be eligible for.
It's just one of the ways we're doing more things for more people together.
Look after your health online at health365.com.au with over 700 of your favourite Australian-owned health, vitamin and skincare products online, home delivered fast. Buy smart, buy Australian. Online at health365.com.au.
Get ready for Twist.
Oh my God. No way.
After Twist. Twists Week starts Sunday.
The Bank of England says this pandemic is pushing Britain into its worst recession in 300 years. The report warns the UK economy could shrink by 14% in 3 months until June. That would be the worst contraction since the Great Frost of 1709.
You remember we talked about uncertainty around Brexit a lot. This is altogether more uncertain.
The Prime Minister Boris Johnson has indicated Britain will stay in lockdown until next month. Across in France, the government will start easing restrictions from Monday. One of Donald Trump's personal valets has joined more than 1.2 million Americans to test positive for coronavirus. The Navy sailor who works at the White House serves the president his meals. Trump says he has tested negative for the virus but will continue to be checked.
Yeah, it's a little bit strange, but it's one of those things. I've had very little personal contact with this gentleman.
As US cases rise, so does its jobless figures. Another 3.2 million people filed for unemployment in the last week. Around 1 in 5 American jobs have now gone in just 7 weeks. Europe is waking up to 75 years to the day since World War II came to an end on the continent. As coronavirus and the outbreak has forced the cancellation of giant street parties that had been planned to mark this historic milestone, a number of other events have been adapted to celebrate the wartime generation. Phoebe Bowden is live at Trafalgar Square in London. Phoebe, what's happening there?
Sandra, Trafalgar Square is nearly empty. It's a far cry from what it was like 75 years ago when victory in Europe was declared, when the Nazis surrendered. Londoners flocked to Trafalgar Square. People climbed on the lions that are behind me. Those who are still alive today, who were there back in 1945, describe it as absolute pure joy and elation when that 6 years of conflict effectively came to an end and they had that taste of freedom. There were parties in the street, and of course, while there can't be parties in the street with the UK still in a strict lockdown, there will be scaled back events. There'll be a service at Westminster. Across Europe, wreaths are being laid at tombs of unknown soldiers, and the Queen is set to address the UK not just on the same day that her father did, but also at the same hour.
Germany, the enemy who drove all Europe into war, has been finally overcome.
Prince Charles will lead the UK in 2-minute silence a little later today, and Brits are still finding their own ways to celebrate across the UK. There's a lot of streets filled with bunting and people having bonfires to mark Victory in Europe Day in their own special way. Sandra.
OK, Phoebe, thank you. Well, it would appear the trials and tribulations of homeschooling aren't just for we common folk. Even the royal family is facing an uphill battle. In a rare interview on British TV, the Duchess of Cambridge has opened up about learning at home, revealing Prince George isn't all that content, admitting he'd rather be doing Charlotte's school projects than his own literacy homework. She also unveiled some new pictures of Prince Louis, showing some creativity.
Which I think charmed absolutely everybody. This was such a great shot.
I should have taken a photograph of what I looked like after that as well.
The Duchess also spoke on a new photo project called Hold Still, capturing the bravery and kindness coming out of this corona pandemic. And there's nothing quite as luxurious as a warm bath. Lesson learned very quickly by this bear cub in the US. He has become an internet star after he was filmed splashing about in a tub by the keepers at Oregon Zoo. Dakota, the black bear, was rescued from the wild, and it seems he is settling in pretty well into his new home. He ain't getting out of that anytime soon. Stay with us after the break. How the markets reacted to plans to get us out of lockdown. And inside the lab, testing for COVID-19, what happens to your samples?
COVIDSafe keeps a secure note of other users you've been near if you have to go out. So, if they test positive for coronavirus, you'll be notified. It'll help us stop the spread sooner so we can get back to the things we love. Download COVIDSafe today. Authorised by the Chief Medical Officer, Canberra.
Tonight's top story, Scott Morrison has outlined a 3-phase plan to pull the country out of corona lockdown. But the New South Wales government has said it will take a slower approach, holding off until at least after the weekend before relaxing any restrictions. Only 4 new cases have been recorded in our state in the last 24 hours. More than 280,000 people have been tested for coronavirus in New South Wales, with more turning up at COVID clinics each day. But as reporter Sydney Peed found out, it takes teams of medical professionals and scientists working furiously behind the scenes to produce as many results as possible in the battle against this virus.
It starts with the swab.
Make it a little bit uncomfortable. That's it, well done.
The back of the throat and nose.
So a few times on either side and into the nostril, about 2 to 3 centimetres deep.
Couriers then collect the coronavirus tests and they're delivered to a molecular lab. They're put into batches before scientists isolate the virus particles of each one. Now they can begin their search for COVID-19.
We can amplify very small amounts of viral RNA or DNA in quite a short period of time, and we can pick these up with very sensitive instruments.
From when it enters the lab, a test result takes just 5 hours, a combination of scientific expertise and cutting-edge technology.
This machine, the Cobas 6800, has enabled labs to ramp up testing, processing up to 1,600 swabs a day. But it's only one of several methods scientists are using to keep on top of testing as the demand increases.
We have about 4 different methods due to the demand for COVID testing and the turnaround time, and also the consumables and reagents that can be in shortage around the world.
Once it's done, all that's left is a graph. If the line remains flat, the test is negative. If the curve peaks, it's positive for coronavirus.
Public health then get on to contact tracing and making sure the patient's all right.
A crucial process in the fight against COVID-19. Sydney Peed for 10 News First.
New South Wales Health has officially declared the COVID-19 outbreak at Macquarie Park's Dorothy Henderson Lodge to be over. It comes 2 months after a 50-year-old carer at the home became the country's first case of untraced community transmission. 6 elderly residents died as a result. A flurry of people buckling under the financial weight of COVID-19 has seen the value of deferred loans blow out to $200 billion. The nation's banks have been swamped by households and businesses, all needing help, and they warn many may still be in a bind in 6 months' time.
In households across the country, there's a money problem.
The financial pain from this COVID event is still unfolding.
Australia's banks have now deferred at least 643,000 loans worth a whopping $200 billion. Almost 60% of those put on hold are mortgages.
Some of these loans will be in default for a very long time.
A surge too in the past week, an extra 100,000 granted a breather because of COVID-19.
We know that there will be people who will not be in a position at the end of 6 months to return to normal repayments. Nobody wants to see anybody fall off a cliff.
So the banks are already talking to regulators and the government about further support.
They've gone into this crisis stronger than they have ever been, and they are well placed to play the role of a shock absorber.
Charities are preparing too for an increase in households needing help with rent, food, health and energy bills.
All of those become real when people have lost their jobs, have been stood down, or have a fear that that may happen.
And so in 6 months' time, some will be facing some serious choices.
We know the economy will not come back at full pelt, and so there is a real social cost.
A social cost that the entire country will feel. Gillian Bowen for 10 News First.
A final check this Friday night on the Run Home Marina. You've got an update for us on that accident at Maroubra.
Yes, Sandra, a car and motorcycle accident still closing Bunurong Road completely southbound, northbound lane 3 affected. We've got crash investigation units on the scene and emergency services with diversions in place. And having a look at General Holmes Drive, it's quite slow entering into the main tunnel. I'm Rina Ivanovic in the ABC Reading Eggs Traffic Chopper.
Matt Burke is back now with more in sport. And Matt, the flu shot's still such a headache tonight for the NRL.
Yeah, that's right, Sandra. Good evening. It's causing grief. And now the Queensland government has weighed in as well. Those details next. While it's water under the bridge for Storm coach Craig Bellamy and flyer Josh Addo-Carr. And it's Tiger versus Phil Mark II, this time with a twist as a couple of NFL legends join in for charity.
As a parent, you ask, what's the best way to support my child? From first words to gaining confidence for new adventures, you're right there by their side. Wherever they are in their learning journey, ABC Reading Eggs is there to help you. Start your ABC Reading Eggs journey today.
Now, Nugget is healthy and regular. Take Metamucil daily, a natural way to stay regular and support a healthy gut.
Get ready for Twist.
Oh my God. No way.
After Twist. Twist's week starts Sunday.
Good evening. More vaccinations dramas in the NRL with 3 Gold Coast players stood down after refusing to receive their flu shot. As we go to where the Queensland government is yet to relax their coronavirus protocols. Ros Kelly is live at NRL HQ. And Ros, good evening to you. Is it still as simple as no jab, no play?
Matt, the Queensland government opened its borders to rugby league on the condition that every single player is vaccinated. Now, the Broncos and Cowboys have advised the NRL that every single member of their playing roster and club have received their jab. However, the Queensland Chief Health Officer was forced to intervene today when it surfaced that 3 Titans players have refused the flu vaccine, forcing the club to stand them down immediately.
Now, ultimately, the states and territories have to determine what their health requirements are as they apply to the NRL, and if they were to be insisting on that, then I would think that was entirely reasonable.
They're not considered part of an anti-doping regime. They're perfectly allowed. They're perfectly permitted. And in this particular situation, in protecting health and safety of fellow competitors, it should be actively encouraged. Indeed, it should be a mandatory requirement.
Now, 10 News First has spoken to Australian Rugby League Commission Chairman Peter V'landys a short time ago, who assured us that the Queensland government remains impressed with the league's biosecurity protocols. He says they have put forward a strong application to allow those players to return to training when the states follow Prime Minister Scott Morrison's plans to relax laws as early as next week. Matt.
Thank you, Ros. Ros Kelly at NRL HQ. Meanwhile, the pressure to get the flu shot is mounting on the Gold Coast, so much so that late this evening, one of those 3 Titans players agreed to get vaccinated.
As players around the NRL are getting back into the swing of group training, it's the jab that has threatened to deliver an uppercut to the game.
It's hard to tell individuals one way or another. I think we've got 2 choices. We either get the flu shot or sign the waiver, and we don't want to be outside of what's required, that's for sure. And right now we've done what's asked.
This afternoon, the NRL stood down Gold Coast trio Nathan Peats, Brian Kelly and Bryce Cartwright, following the Queensland Government directive of no jab, no play. Pete's hooked into accepting the vaccine today and tweeted his wife and both sons are vaccinated. He had a bad experience in 2012 when he was at Souths and had the flu shot, and that's the only reason behind it. Set to face trial over sexual assault charges, sideline forward Jack de Belin remains on the Dragons' reduced top 30 roster for 2020.
He's got a court case coming up, as we know, in June, as well as, the welfare around Jack.
Paul McGregor also stressed the importance of contact sessions resuming on Monday.
To make sure the progression goes in the right way, that we don't have too much risk involved.
Over at Canterbury, Kieran Foran could be in line for a comeback following shoulder surgery.
At the moment he's doing everything he can and he's tracking along really well.
Charles Christian for 10 News First.
Storm coach Craig Bellamy says things are back to normal between he and Josh Addo-Carr. The Origin winger was heavily fined last week after he posted videos breaking quarantine restrictions. The indiscretion prompted the master of the coach to implement a social media ban on his playing group, which he says all have adhered to.
Certainly wasn't a full-time ban, or you can't use it outside when you go home, or whatever. So at the end of the day, there's just some situations that I'd prefer that they didn't use social media. It's just back to normal now. For Josh around his teammates. Obviously he's glad to be back, and that his teammates are glad to see him back as well. And he's been training really well.
And the Storm will continue training in Albury next week when Captain Cam Smith is expected to join the group. It's been a year and a half since Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods went head-to-head in the match for a cool $9 million large. This time, they'll join forces with legendary quarterbacks Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. And the trash talk has already begun.
I don't know, actually, Tiger, if you know what this looks like. You might have caught a glimpse, but that's actually what the trophy looks like had you have won.
Hold on one second. I just got an ice bath. I'm a little bit chilly. Green jacket on here.
If their golf game is anything like their banter, it won't be the last time they tee off with our play of the day. And May 24, Sandra, that's when that kicks off. Also, just some news before we go, breaking in the NRL. The rest of the competition's matches will be officiated by only one referee due to cost-cutting measures. And some may say that's a good thing.
They'll be busy, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
Thanks, Matt. Coming up next, the Prime Minister has announced what happens next, but how long until it actually happens?
How good are Fridays? It was perfect at Putney, 21 degrees there right now. The Daily Bailey Weather Wall, the weekend edition. It's coming your way with some fabulous news next.
Start earning today. BP Rewards. Your rewards, your way.
Meet the crew. They got their own way of betting. And this is me. I've always got the answer.
Make this Saturday one to remember. Get $4 odds for Dallasan to run first or second in the South Australian Derby. PointsBet.
Spoiling mum on Mother's Day is super important. So I'm creating my own restaurant at home this year. Udi's 3-course Mother's Day box lets me be the chef. Visit Udi at odee.com.au.
Yes, Mr. Bailey is back. My favourite time of the day. And Tim, you seem to be doing what you do best, and frankly, that's just showing off.
Oh, look, we're loving the blue skies. I was loving your words too, but that was a fabulous Friday. You and I, we both love them. We kiss them on the lips, we love them so much. But the weekend's looking pretty good too. Saturday, what about 27 degrees. It's December in May, but there is a cold front coming. Let's hit the Daily Bailey weather wall, a forecast where we get it all and see what's going on for that fabulous weekend of yours. Cold fronts, haven't they just been charging through the Southern Ocean towards Tasmania and Victoria and giving WA a bit of a clip behind the ears as well. A little bit of high cloud drifts off a low pressure system south of Indonesia, drops across WA as well. You notice that New South Wales is pretty much a cloud-free zone simply because, well, the blue sky is ruling the piece thanks to a high pressure system. Did somebody say high pressure system? I've got one to show you right now. Let's have a look at it. And there it is, out in the Tasman Sea. The blue sky factory has been dominating, keeping an eye on the cold front, moving through, and it will whack through New South Wales tomorrow afternoon and evening, but not before the harbour city gets to 27 or 28 degrees. It will cause some damaging winds across the ACT and the Snowy Mountains. Around about above 1900 metres, we could see blasts of 120 kilometres an hour. Below 1600, 80 to 90 k's an hour. Snow to around about 1200 metres as well. So it's a fierce system that southern New South Wales will feel, but Saturday looks to be pretty good in most spots. Business, the Broly predicted precipitation, drips and drops across rooftops and crops. There you go. Following the cold front through Tasmania, gets a good old whack of winter in autumn. Victoria likewise. Some rainfall for New South Wales later in the day. As you can see, Saturday by about 6 o'clock, the south end of the state cops a little bit of it, as does the Central Coast, north, and that will be that. So how do we get our Friday feels tonight? I know what we do. We plug into your magnificent photographs and you take us somewhere absolutely breathtaking. Let's have a look at the wall where you get it all. Wilson shots, curl. Look at that shot. Shared on Instagram. Do it, folks. Some 46,000 photographs now. Hashtag Daily Bailey NSW, and follow me on Insta. That's Daily Bailey 10. All right, next up on the wall, Newport. How good does that look? Look at the reflection, the light, everything right. Scotty Berry Photography. Thank you very much. You make me feel like a Friday. And finally tonight, yes, there's a cow on the TV. And I'm talking about right there. I am as glorious. All right, let's go and find some forecasts for you. And Broome tomorrow, 35. Perth, 20 degrees. Sydney, 27. Canberra, a shower and 17. Adelaide, 16. And Hobart, 13 degrees. That cold front starting to move through, bringing showers and low temperatures. All right, New South Wales zooms into Bales. Good looking day. 22 Dubbo. Orange, 14. Cold front gets hold of it. Newcastle does 26 before a late shower. Nowra 25 degrees, fine and sunny. And Lismore and Coffs Harbour doing it nicely on a Saturday. OK, super suburbs of Sydney. This is your day tomorrow. Katoomba 18, Penrith 27, Campbelltown 26 degrees, Terry Hills 25. And the official forecast for Sydney, 27 degrees, a fine and sunny morning and then some clouds in the afternoon. 7-day forecast in 25 minutes.
Making news now, the path to reopening Australia made clear. The Prime Minister outlining this three-step process. But no changes yet for New South Wales. The Premier saying all restrictions will remain in place until at least the end of the weekend, and the state will follow its own timetable. And one of Sydney's most prestigious schools swindled. How police say a former worker from Mariah College in the city's east stole more than $7 million. Well, the Prime Minister has delivered a roadmap of how the country will get out of its COVID-19 coma and get the economy up and running by July. A three-phase plan has been released, which begins with small gatherings of 10 people, playgrounds reopening and even dine-in meals being allowed. The end goal, interstate travel and a drink at the pub.
COVID-19 has changed the way we live forever.
So many Australians are hurting right now. Lives turned upside down, painful separation from their loved ones.
But the PM assures us there's now a way out.
You can stay under the doona forever, and you'll never face any danger. But we've got to get out from under the doona.
A three-step plan to ease restrictions.
In this plan, we walk before we run. We cannot be too timid. There will be risks. There will be challenges.
Step 1: allowing public gatherings of up to 10 people. Opening up restaurants and cafes, shopping centres and playgrounds, and local travel.
We want to keep it gentle and careful. Step 1 is tentative baby steps.
Step 2, gatherings of up to 20 people. Gyms, beauty salons and cinemas will be reopened, and some interstate travel could be on the cards. But it doesn't come without risks.
We cannot allow our fear of going backwards from stopping us from going forwards.
And by July, we could see gatherings of up to 100 people. Step 3 includes the reopening of pubs and clubs and all interstate travel. But as for when the changes take place...
The pace, though, will totally be up to the states and territories. They will be responsible for setting their own timetable and communicating that.
By this afternoon, state and territory leaders had already started doing that, and they know it needs to be done carefully.
And we don't want to lose the control we've got.
So, when it comes to international travel...
We're not going to relax any of our border measures soon, and we're going to continue to quarantine all returning travellers.
Progress from this three-step plan will be reviewed every 3 weeks. The Prime Minister, he's being realistic.
There will be challenges, there will be outbreaks, there will be more cases, there will be setbacks. Not everything will go to plan.
But the most positive sign yet is that there is one.
Thank you very much.
Peter Van Onselen for 10 News First.
While some states are already announcing the immediate easing of restrictions, it won't be that easy in New South Wales. The Premier says we will follow the framework, but on our own timetable, and no changes will be announced before next week.
With people cooped up for weeks and businesses battling, the excitement of a return to normal is palpable.
Oh, I just can't wait. It feels like a lifetime.
The Prime Minister and his Chief Medical Officer today delivering the words which were music to the ears of business owners.
If the states and territories choose to implement in stage 1, they could start with 10 people. They may well not.
New South Wales won't, though, with the Premier urging caution for a little while longer.
You can't just make a decision and then implement it automatically. There's 8 million people I need to consider.
Gladys Berejiklian says it may be weeks before additional restrictions are eased, even longer for the beers to start flowing in our beloved pubs.
That's horrible. That's truly horrible. I've got some of them that I'm looking forward to, and I can't wait.
Ultimately, there's only 2 ways to release the handbrake.
If we continue to increase the rate of testing, people download the COVID Safe app, we can move a bit more quickly than what we'd hoped.
There was some good news, though, with people able to go out and get their mum a Mother's Day gift, with retailers starting to open their doors.
We welcome that, but we ask both the managers of those stores but also the customers to make sure you practice good social distancing when you're in those stores.
One of the main hurdles our state is facing is being the major hub for international arrivals, leaving New South Wales more susceptible to outbreaks. Another plane load touching down today, one of 3 collecting Aussies from India.
I am very lucky and feel charming to on Aussie land again. Like a kangaroo jumping.
New South Wales Health wasn't so lucky today, again finding itself in the firing line over its handling of the Ruby Princess.
Did it concern you that there wasn't someone from New South Wales Health to contact?
Yes.
The startling revelation by the New South Wales Port Authority. A flurry of phone calls also detailing how a decision to allow the ship to dock was reversed after being incorrectly told 2 sick patients were not infected with the virus, a decision which would prove deadly. Lachlan Kennedy for 10 News First.
A hospital bungle that killed one child and permanently changed the life of another has cost a Sydney man $100,000. Today, Christopher Turner was convicted of making a deadly mistake on the job that could have been avoided with some simple tests.
Benish and Danielle Khan have been waiting years for this decision, but seeing Christopher Turner convicted and fined $100,000 for his deadly mistake does not heal their little girl. This never should have happened, they said in a statement, and we must make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. Turner had installed gas outlets back to front and didn't check them, so when Amelia was born at Bankstown Hospital 4 years ago, she was given nitrogen instead of oxygen.
Her parents will have to provide care and assistance for Amelia and deal with their own grief arising from the severe disabilities suffered by their daughter for the rest of their lives.
A lifelong pain that's being felt by Sonia and Yusuf Ghanem too. Their little boy John was killed less than an hour after he was born from the same bungle.
Ms Gunham continues to grieve the death of her son. She refused to dispose of his baby clothes, and she thought about John every day, how he would look and how he would speak.
Turner, now unemployed in the pandemic, pleaded guilty to failing to comply with a health and safety duty in February.
While Mr Turner has made mistakes with tragic consequences, the evidence shows that he is a decent man who has worked hard and led a good life.
Right up until 2 families and their children were robbed of that very opportunity. Kimberly Pratt for 10 News First.
After a week of coalition infighting and calls for him to be sacked, Transport Minister Andrew Constance has been stripped of his role as Leader of the House and State Parliament. It's believed to be punishment for the Bega MP announcing his nomination for the vacant federal seat of Eden Monaro on Tuesday, before then withdrawing it a day later.
Well, he indicated already that he wants to spend his time in his community. He has a very big portfolio in transport. So it stands to reason that he no longer have that responsibility as Leader of the House.
Attorney General Mark Speakman will take over that position. Cleaning efforts are ramping up across the public transport network ahead of a return to face-to-face schooling from Monday. Additional cleaners have been deployed to Bondi Junction interchange and will be wiping down buses in between services. More people are starting to use public transport. Patronage is up more than 20% over the past 4 weeks. An elite eastern suburb school has been defrauded of millions of dollars, allegedly by one of its former bean counters. 57-year-old Augustine Gus Nosti worked as a financial controller at Moriah College for 15 years. During that time, police claim he made more than 400 illegal transactions, ranging from $2,000 to $240,000.
$7.4 million, it's certainly not money I have lying around, and the average person wouldn't.
Mr Nosti allegedly deposited the funds from the school straight into his personal bank account. He has been released on bail to face court in July. Stay with us. Up next, how did the markets react to today's big virus news? In sport, vaccination consternation for the NRL, with 2 Titans players refusing to have a flu shot. And the life of a professional rugby league player laid bare, and it's not always as glamorous as it looks.
Shame. At Toyota, we're all about your safety. That's why our dealerships and service centres are staying open. Older feeling. Toyota.
If you're in business in Australia, right now you're facing one of your toughest challenges. Business Australia can help you manage your responsibilities to your employees and assist with strategies to maintain and sustain your business. For free advice and support, visit businessaustralia.com.
Do you want food that's flavourful, fresh and fantastic?
Oh my lord, it's going to be so good.
Do you want stars that are famous, flamboyant and funny?
I'm me, if nothing else.
Well, join Mr. Foodie and Mr. Fabulous for a 5-star Friday tonight.
We learned today that because of COVID-19, tens of thousands of Australians simply can't afford to pay their mortgages or business loans right now. And family budgets, well, they've been annihilated. Gillian Bowen has a look at the day in finance.
Hello there. The nation's banks say they're working around the clock to help customers feeling the financial impact of COVID-19. They've revealed today they've now deferred at least 643,000 loans worth a whopping $200 billion. Now, almost 60% of those put on hold during the pandemic are mortgages. Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank says the economic damage from the pandemic in the 3 months to June is tipped to break records. Its latest forecast for the economy will be that it will shrink by 10%. The largest in the history of the quarterly national accounts. It's got unemployment at about 10%, but for those workers on JobKeeper, the RBA believes around a quarter of them could actually be better off during this time. Either way, the recovery is likely to be slow. To the share market, it's finished the week in positive territory. Retailers lifting after the PM raised the prospect of the economy reopening by July, but it was Myer shares leading the way, up by more than 45%. And in other big news, a declaration from the Woolies boss that the toilet paper frenzy of 2020 is officially over. To the dollar, it continued to gain strength against the US, now buying 65.2 US cents. And that's finance.
Matt Burke is back now with a look at the rest of the day in sport. Matt, jabs are flying in the NRL over flu shots.
Yeah, that's right, Sandra. Good evening. While the Prime Minister has repeated his no jab, no play line, but Scott Morrison says it's up to state governments to decide if NRL players will be able to play without getting a flu vaccination. For the latest from NRL HQ, here's Ros Kelly.
The NRL's proposed May 28 restart is looming, and while the Project Apollo Brains Trust were locked in meetings here at Rugby League Central all day, the Queensland Government came down hard on the code for not keeping its promise of ensuring all players will be vaccinated. The Chief Health Officer forcing the Titans to bench 3 players who refused the flu jab.
Now, ultimately, the states and territories have to determine what their health requirements are as they apply to the NRL. And if they were to be insisting on that, then I would think that was entirely reasonable.
Look, I agree with the Prime Minister. The health advice is that they should have a flu injection.
They're not considered part of an anti-doping regime. They're perfectly allowed. They're perfectly permitted. And in this particular situation, in protecting health and safety of fellow competitors, it should be actively encouraged. Indeed, it should be a mandatory requirement.
Now, 10 News first spoke to Australian Rugby League Commission Chairman Peter V'landys a short time ago, who assured us that the Queensland Government remain impressed with the league's biosecurity measures, and they have put in a strong application for those players to return to training as soon as the states follow Scott Morrison's proposal to relax laws as soon as next week.
Elite sport isn't always as glamorous as it looks, and New Brown's career is the perfect example. The former Shark and Bulldog has endured more setbacks than one could imagine, but it seems the 25-year-old is unbreakable. Emma Lawrence has this inspirational story.
I remember calling my mum and, yeah, no.
You want it?
No. Yeah, she pretty much said, I'd rather have my son than have a contract, so yeah.
Do you want a water? Do you want to take a break?
No.
A call for help in his darkest hour, an act of courage that saved his life and changed it forever. A life defined not by adversity, but unrivalled resilience. The year is 2011. A bright-eyed 16-year-old leaves his big family in Christchurch to chase an NRL dream in Sydney.
For me, I come from nothing. I came from poverty, and for me, I wanted to, you know, break that cycle for my family that, you know, I can do something. If I can do it, then all the thousands of other Polynesian kids can too.
So let me go.
The whole city knew that, okay, let's keep an eye on this guy. And so for me, having that pressure of, you know, not just my family, friends, but the whole city.
The homesickness was debilitating, but Noo's family convinced him to stay, and eventually he debuted on the big stage.
Brown, who takes them on and scores for the Sharks.
The next big thing, they said, 19 years old and on top of the world.
You just think you're invincible, and nothing's gonna break you. You know, you're gonna earn top money for the rest of your life.
But life doesn't work that way. Next year at the Auckland Nines, Noo did his ACL. That's when things got real tough. No footy, no family, no outlet to speak up.
This will be the night for Noo Brown. Just gets his head in the wrong spot.
I think guys like Sam Tigatizi back in those days, Jason Bakoya.
Them reaching out to you, did that save your life?
Yeah, they pretty much saved my life. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here today. And I don't think I've sort of told them in that way.
Will you tell them one day?
One day, hopefully when I see them.
And with their support, Noo started his next chapter at the Bulldogs. Luck, once again, not on his side. 2 surgeries on a fractured foot, both unsuccessful.
We went and saw 4 different surgeons. Those 4 surgeons said, look mate, you're going to have to get bone fusions. You're not going to play football ever again. And I was like, oh well, that can't be the case.
Refusing to take no for an answer, Noo found a surgeon in Melbourne who did a bone graft from his hip. The foot now better than ever.
This is going to be the last surgery. I've gone through a lot over the last 3 years, and trust me, this is the last one.
With no contract this year, Nu's out once again to prove he's still got it. Still in a moon boot, he's training twice a day, hired his own high-performance coach, even meditating and drinking bone broth.
When you believe in yourself so much and you know your ability and you know your purpose, you know your calling, it's like, for me, it's like, man, I'm not done. Don't go.
Nu's also ventured into videography and he's in high demand. His greatest gift, though, gratitude and perspective.
It's a dream job, and I don't think us athletes understand how lucky we've got it. I didn't realise how amazing football is until it's gone. It feels like there's an empty space in your heart kind of thing, and I want it back.
I'm bringing you a case of drive. Sandra, it's always great to hear the backstories of these players. Let's hope it gets a start sometime soon.
Yeah, I want the fairy tale to come true.
Very much.
Thank you, Matt. Nice story. Stay with us after the break. Bailey's back with your weekend weather forecast. Stick around.
It is the heart of the home, it's the heart of our family. We need it to last a long time.
We definitely make the whole process affordable and easy.
So to create the amazing look without the big prices, beautiful kitchens that look amazing.
Up next, the PM lays out the plan to lead us out of lockdown. Is the NRL set to stand down anti-vax players from its season reboot? The bumpy ride for this former CEO who quit his job to explore Australia on camelback. Plus, meet the Aussies battling it out to be the ultimate legend of lockdown. The project next.
Well, moving home is never easy, but it's even more difficult if you're a giraffe at Taronga Zoo. That's what keepers discovered when they were asked to move Jimmy Yu and Zara Faye into their new state-of-the-art enclosure overlooking Sydney Harbour.
The move just went so smoothly. We always plan for these worst-case scenarios, but it couldn't have gone better.
They only moved a couple of 100 metres, but the trip took years to plan. The animals were trained 3 times a day to get in and out of their trailers with ease.
From a giraffe to a pain in the neck, the Daily Bailey weather wall, the forecast where you get it all, the weekend edition, and you're going to like it, I think, folks. Couple of real different days on the way. What about that for a fabulous Friday? They would take that every day of the week in May. OK, cold front pushes up from the Southern Ocean. That's been a pattern for the last week. It clips Tasmania and Victoria and southern New South Wales, producing damaging winds across the ACT and the Snowy Mountains tonight. Also dropping snow to around about 1,200 metres as well. Meanwhile, high pressure system that brought all the northerly winds and warmth to many areas of New South Wales today hangs around up until late afternoon tomorrow, and that'll see Sydney get to around about 27 or 28 degrees tomorrow. So Saturday, not a bad looking day. Change will come through though for Mother's Day. Your temperatures are going to be around about 8 or 9 degrees chillier, but fine and sunny and around 19 degrees in the harbour city. So let's have a real good look at Saturday across New South Wales. Gee, it's a good-looking backyard, isn't it? Broken Hill, 17 degrees. It's windy. Some showers, thanks to that front. Dubbo, 22 degrees. Orange, likewise, 14 degrees with some showers. Tamworth might even get a little bit stormy across the New England. 9 the minimum, 22 the maximum with some boom crash opera. Coffs Harbour and Lismore get away with a brilliant-looking day. 25 degrees, fine and sunny. That's a super Saturday. Newcastle, a few showers, 26 degrees. Maybe a storm as well. Nowra, 15 through to 25, your temperature spread, mainly blue sky. Canberra, a little windy and a little showery, 17 degrees. And Bega, doing it beautifully, 25 degrees. All right, the super suburbs of Sydney on a Saturday are looking pretty well mint. Penrith, 27 degrees. Katoomba, 18 degrees. Richmond, 26. Around about 5 o'clock, you'll see some showers push through and a little bit of cooler air. Campbelltown, though, before that, 26 degrees. Bankstown, 26. Terry Hills does 25. Gosford, 26 degrees. That is a December day in May, so you'll take it. All right, 7-day forecast. Let's whack that out for you. Mother's Day, 19 18 degrees. It's sunny, but it's chilled. Monday, 19 and 20 degrees right through the rest of the week. In the Greater West, Mother's Day, we love ya, 18 degrees, and then a pretty good-looking week. Souls, we love our mums. They're the best in the world, aren't they?
They are, indeed. Thank you, Tim. That is the news for now this Friday, May 8. From all of us here, please look after yourselves and each other. See you next week.
Tonight, the PM lays out the plan to lead us out of lockdown.
Today, we move ahead with